Historic floods this year caused major damage in the Midwest. The severe weather impacted cities, towns, and farms along the Mississippi River. Trymaine Lee talked to farmers impacted by this and the mayor of Greenville, Mississippi.
Well, the scientists at the University of Southern Mississippi think so. They believe in climate change. They believe in sea level rise. They're doing research on those topics. And so, yes, we believe that climate change is impacting. It's giving more storms. It's giving more rainfall in certain areas. And so, will it continue? Is this a cycle? That's something that we'll have to wait and watch. See.
And not to be too redundant, but how is the ripple effect from climate change, when you think about all that I just mentioned, how is that affecting folks on the front lines, such as yourself?
Well, I think it affects all of us. It affects us because we're in the water every day and we're tending to our oysters, but it affects the fishermen down here on the coast. It affects shrimpers. It affects the person who's running a hotel. It affects restaurants. So all of that's playing together. And it's not just here on the coast. I mean, you can see it happening up the watershed as well. All that water affected businesses and homes and families and farmers.
Is there any question in your mind at all that what we're seeing here is a result of climate change?
There's no question at all. When you've had 3 floods from 2011, 2016, and 2019, and from 2005 having over $200 billion in actual losses on the Mississippi River corridor just from flooding, it's no doubt in my mind that climate change and climate risk is very real.
And Trymaine Lee is on the ground in Vicksburg, Mississippi. Trymaine, we heard your interviews with farmers there in Mississippi and the mayor of Greenville. What about people not in that region? Are residents farther away from those floods also being affected in a significant way?
Thank you for having me, Allison. Certainly, you heard from one of those people affected, Anita Arguelles, who is an oyster farmer on the Gulf Coast. But I'm here in the Mississippi Delta, and you can see the Mississippi River behind me.
Yeah.
It begins here. When you have record levels of rain, record levels of flooding, it all flows south towards New Orleans and Baton Rouge. Now, to protect those big cities, when we have this kind of historic flooding, they open spillways, right? So you have all that so-called fresh water, which really isn't fresh. It's full of fertilizers, insecticides, clay, everything. That dumps into Lake Pontchartrain, which then seeps over into the Gulf Coast. What happens is, and I don't want to get too technical here, because you have that water with very low salinity, then it goes into that salty water. What happens is all of those, that sea life that relies on salty water, dolphins, sea turtles, they get the influx of this fresh water. They get sores, lesions, infections. Because the water is warmer and you have this influx, you have algae bloom. So all of those folks, like Anita Arguelles and her husband, who just started his oyster business, when they had that influx of all that so-called fresh water, they lost 90% of their oyster, right?
Gosh.
So people who make their livelihood off of the water, I spoke to a riverboat captain who said, you know, he's a 3rd-generation riverboat captain. He's telling his son, don't even get into business, because people don't want to come out and enjoy the water because you have dead dolphins with lesions and dead sea turtles and algal blooms. So it's really rough. So when you think about the Mississippi, you have to think about the entire length and also the entire rivershed corridor. It's rough, Allison.
Yeah, it sounds like an enormous problem, not only on from a business perspective and a livelihood perspective, but also for those creatures who are trying to survive in the sea. What are those communities and what are those people doing to try to fight these extreme weather events? I mean, it seems like a very big battle to fight, but we know these start with little things.
You'd imagine there'd be more of a battle than we're actually seeing. We are here in deep red Mississippi. So many folks, especially politicians, aren't even acknowledging that climate change is actually a thing. But when you get down to the backwater area, you get down to the Delta, there is a debate over, adding these massive pumps that might get some of the water out of some of the farmland. But studies have shown that you only alleviate about 25%, 23 to 25% of that flooding. The big issue is people are living in places where we probably shouldn't be living. But because we are in the Delta and this is that rivershed area, that's really lush, really fertile land. And so right now, people are trying to figure out exactly what to do. People are starting to put pressure on politicians to not only acknowledge that climate change is a thing, but ultimately do something about it. But as of right now, there's not much folks can do when you have these once-in-a-lifetime floods happening, as the mayor of Greenville said, every few years.
Trymaine, I can only imagine that leaves people feeling really defeated. I mean, if we're not addressing the problem, if people aren't taking steps to correct it, I mean, are people just, you referenced one man who said to his son, don't even bother getting into this business. I mean, do people there feel like they don't have much hope for a future?
If nothing changes, folks say, the worst is yet to come. And people are starting to listen because now it's affecting people's pocketbooks.
Yeah.
When people don't want to come and they don't trust eating the seafood, when you have dolphins floating around, no one wants to bring their child to the river and see any of that. So people are starting to listen, but the concern is if we don't do something soon to address this problem, it's only getting worse because as our environment gets warmer and the climate gets hotter, more rain, more torrential downfalls, more flooding, more destruction.
Oh, serious situation there in Mississippi. Trymaine Lee, thanks so much for bringing it to us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Allison.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.